Towards a relevant, feasible and sustainable project plan. Welcome to the second part of the LFA workshop. My name is Rikard Eduards and I'm a program officer at the ICLD. In case some of you weren't present for the first part of the workshop, I will start with a short introduction to LFA and quickly go through what was covered in the first workshop. LFA is a project planning tool that through the 9 steps shown on the screen goes through every essential aspect of planning a project. It is not the only project planning tool or method out there, of course, but we believe it is the most reliable one, as it is comprehensive, it ensures broad stakeholder participation, and it allows you to measure the project's results. In the first part of the workshop, we went through the first 4 steps in LFA and conducted 2 exercises together. In this class, we will go through the last 5 steps and also conduct 2 exercises together. Seeing the steps in LFA numbered 1 through 9, maybe you think it's a very rigid process and you need to do all the steps one by one and never go back to the ones before. But in practice, you will most likely jump back and forth a bit between the steps as they are closely interwoven and for reasons that will soon become apparent. Step 1 is the context analysis. What is the political, financial, and environmental situation like where the project is to be implemented? In ICLD partnerships, you are fortunate to have much of the knowledge already in between the 2 partners. However, don't refrain from using external knowledge as well. Step 2 is the stakeholder analysis, and having this step early shifts power to the target groups, whose voices must be heard in order to have a truly relevant project. Step 3 is the problem analysis. And I am pretty convinced that all of you who were present in the first part of the workshop thought that this was a pretty demanding step, and rightfully so. By defining the main problem, its causes and its effects, the whole project takes form. I want to emphasize that the ICLD has a mandate to strengthen local governments, and therefore the problems that you address in your project should be on the organizational level of your local government. For example, you might want to address an issue with, I'm just making something up, people with speech impediments do not participate in citizen dialogues. But another way to frame this, and that enables you to have a much more coherent project plan, is that your local government's citizen dialogues exclude people with speech impediments. Please review your project trees now if you do not have them fresh in your memory. Step 4 is the objective analysis. And this is a pretty straightforward step. You simply turn your problems into their opposite, their desirable states. And you turn the causes to your main problem into intermediate objectives. You turn your main problem into your project objective. And you turn the effects of your main problem into your long-term objectives. Remember that your objectives in themselves should not be activities, but rather they should be desirable states that prevail once all the activities have been carried out. And activities, that is just what step number 5 is about. One way to look at activities from an LFA perspective is as those actions which turn a problem into an objective. And in LFA, we only assign activities to the causes to the main problem. Since once the causes have been eliminated, the main problem is resolved, and thereby the project objective is realized. The output of this step is an activity plan where you describe your activities as you normally would, with a time frame, associated costs, person in charge, and so on. And to do this, you simply look at your causes to your main problem and consider what activities are necessary and possible for your organization to carry out in order to turn them into their intermediate objectives. But just how many activities can you fit into your project? This is what step 6, resource planning, is for. Consider your resources, time, personnel, funds, facilities, maybe more, and see how many activities you can fit. If you find that you need to scale down your activities, you will have to go back and look at your objectives and see if they can all be reached anyway. Probably they cannot. Maybe you have to take some objectives away. Maybe you need to change your whole project. Now that would be very unfortunate news for you, of course. But we all know that we shouldn't bite off more than we can chew. So it's actually one of the most common mistakes we see when we assess applications at the ICLD, that agents of change with the best intentions, such as yourselves, want to do so much, and they apply with an overly ambitious project that has no real prospects to succeed. Now, following the steps in LFA, you can avoid this pitfall. Now, at this point, you should have a relevant project plan with activities that enable you to meet the objectives that you have set. But how will you be able to really tell if the objectives have been met? This is what step number 7 is for: indicators and mean of verification. An indicator is something that you can measure and that tells if an objective has been met or not. It can be quantitative, like the number of participants in a workshop, or it can be qualitative, like the subjective experiences from that workshop. We recommend that you set 2 to 3 indicators to the intermediate objectives, as well as to the project objective. And for your project to be transparent, you also need to tell the world how you intend to make these measurements. And this how you make the measurements is the means of verification. And this could be through interviews, through questionnaires, or looking at official records. In the examples shown on the screen, you see that you also have targets and baselines. A target is a realistic assessment of what you think you can achieve through your activities. And the baseline is simply the situation before the project started. I advise you to pause the video now and examine the example in detail. Now, I would like you to apply this concept on your own projects, either ongoing ones or future projects that you are planning right now. For your project objective and one intermediate objective, assign 1 to 3 indicators, means of verifications, baselines, and targets. The next step, the penultimate step, is risk analysis and risk management. Risks are events that might occur and that would impact your project negatively. Risks can be external, like political turmoil or natural disasters, virus pandemics, or they can be internal, like corruption or high staff turnover. And the value of these steps comes from identifying the most severe risks and devising actions that can manage these risks. To make this step yourselves, you look at the risks that you have identified and you assign a probability of them occurring on a scale 1 to 5. Also, you estimate the consequence of this risk if it would occur on the same scale 1 to 5. And multiplying these numbers, you get a risk value. So the risk value could be between 0 and 25. And for the most severe risks, you need to think, what activities might we need to carry out before the risk even occurs? Looking at the example shown on the screen, you see that one risk is high turnover of personnel. This risk was awarded a probability of 4 and a consequence of 5, which yields the risk value 20. Therefore, no less than 4 risk management actions were devised: to train more staff, to create manuals, to set up an internal training system, and to avoid independence on a single individual. The second risk in this example is delayed deliveries, and this only was awarded a risk value of 4, and therefore no actions were necessary. And consider that since many of these actions need to be carried out before the risk actually could become reality, this step will require time, personnel, and funds again. So you need to go back to your resource planning and see if you can fit all the risk management actions into your resources. You might again need to adjust which objectives that you can meet or not in your project. Now I would like you to do this exercise yourselves in the project teams. Look at least 2 risks in your project and assign a probability, a consequence, see what risk value you get, and devise some actions to manage these risks for the most severe ones. Step 9, the last step, is analysis of assumptions. And this step is sometimes treated a little bit like a parenthesis, as it does not always generate new information for your project. However, in some cases, the whole project can rely on an assumption that you make. It could be, for example, a new law that you assume will be passed, or that an essential partner, such as an NGO, will continue to be operative and honor their commitments. Assumptions often come up already in the context analysis, or you can see them as causes to your main problem but that lie outside of your control. So if you find a cause to your main problem that lie outside of your control, these are actually assumptions. So that was it. Those were the 9 steps of LFA. And I am well aware that it is easier to go through them in theory than in practice. But if you have gone through all these 9 steps together in the international project teams, I'm convinced that you will have communicated a lot, learned a lot, and not least produced a relevant, feasible, and sustainable project plan. Thank you for your participation.